Welcome to the Creative Chats podcast with Mike Brennan. Hey, welcome to another episode of Creative Chats. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. Today, I have a conversation with my new friend, Anthony Markey. And Anthony is a business profit advocate and a podcaster. And he has a podcast called I Know a Guy. And today is all about the power of conversations. It's about the power of connections. Anthony loves to lean in, have these conversations with people, leverage them to figure out who do you need to know and who do I know that I can connect you with. And he is all about networking in the non-sleazy, the non-salesy way. Because if you're like me, networking, especially back in the day, it was gross. But this is about authentic relationships. This is about meeting people where they're at, asking questions, listening, and figuring out how you can bring some value to them, how you can bring some connections to them and say, hey, you need to know this person that I know, and making that introduction. So if you're someone today, you're thinking, man, I really wish I had more people in my network. I really wish I had more connections, especially as I build my creative business, as I do this thing, as I'm an entrepreneur. Maybe you're just starting out. Wherever you are today, I think we can all use more people in our corner. And you may be one conversation, one relationship away from things completely changing. So I want you to lean into this episode today, take some notes, follow Anthony's rule book as far as serving, listening, showing up, creating this environment that is one of reciprocity. And without further ado, here is my creative chat with Anthony Markey. Well, Anthony, welcome to the Creative Chats podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah. So, we got connected through someone who was on the podcast previously for both of us, I believe. And Patrick, and he said, you guys got to know each other because I think you're doing some aligned things and have some shared values, I suppose. So that's what led us to today. And I'm excited to dive into your story, your journey, how creativity shows up for you. But before we get too far down into that, you are a business profit advocate and you have a podcast as well called I Know a Guy, which I have to just say, being from New York, New Jersey, that title, it's like, hey, I know a guy, I got a guy. So that resonates with me, and we're going to talk more about that as we go. But just as we're diving in here today, when you're at a party, when you're at a place and someone asks you like, hey, who are you? What do you do? Like, what is your typical response, your go-to for that?
That's actually kind of a hard question because I've been a bit in transition. My go-to is, I'm self-employed because a lot of times they're just asking to be friendly. If they're curious, I'm way more than willing to go, bend their ear for a while. So typically, I'm self-employed. If they ask, I'm like, I'm a business profit advocate and podcast host. And then I go however far down that rabbit hole. I feel like a lot of times they're wanting me to ask back what they do. So that's probably what I follow up with is, okay.
Sure.
What do you do? And then, we can circle back around. But self-employed is kind of how I start to see, test the waters.
Yeah. Yeah. So where did your story begin with this? Like, I mean, obviously you weren't like, hey, this is something I'm going to do right out of the gate, right? Like, this is probably something that you evolved into, that you got curious about. You started to test some things, right? Talk a little bit about like, where did you come from in terms of your background? And then what did that look like as you started to pivot more into your own thing?
Yeah. So I started off, after high school, I went to college. I was mostly in college for football and volleyball girls, right? So wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I grew up. I thought I was going to be in nursing. So I was like, okay, we're going to study nursing. I'll have a job forever. It's going to be perfect. I went and got my EMT to see if I even liked medicine. It was like kind of nice to dip your toe in. And turns out I really liked the ambulance, but hated working in the hospital. So I was like, okay, I'm never going to be a nurse if I hate the hospital. Maybe I'll be a flight nurse. There's height limitations. You can't be taller than 6'2". So I was like, well, that's out. I'm never going to do that. And then working in the back of the ambulance, again, it's not super tall back there. I felt like I was just hunched over people while they're having a bad day and I'm sweating on them. I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this forever either. So I tried a bunch of different things. I've literally probably done everything from working at a store, working in call centers, blue collar work, construction. The very last thing that I did before becoming an entrepreneur was I was a painter sandblaster, and it was a very distinct night. I remember it. I was working overnights as a painter. It was -40 with wind chill. So I'm in overalls and a sweatshirt and all that. And I had to use the restroom. I'm like, all we have is porta potties. And I have to go outside in -40 in the dark, remind you, overnight with overalls and figure it out. I'm like, oh, there's got to be something better than this. Like, this is awful. I'm not a Viking. I don't want to do that. So eventually I started looking into, the entrepreneur world, started off in the life and health industry, learned a little bit about sales. And, since then I've transitioned a lot. My offers changed quite a bit. I went from, life side to health side to back to doing both to, going from B2C to B2B to where I am now, to where I'm a B2B agent, and then discovering the through line with everything that I've liked to do has been more of a recent development where it's like, I actually just really enjoy talking to people. It's not necessarily the selling part. That's fun. Don't get me wrong. If you have a sale, you're like, oh, that felt good. But it's actually the having a conversation, learning about people, creating connections, finding connections for others, making introductions, things like that. It's been the through line with what I've liked to do. And that's where I've kind of landed now as my business side. I'm a business profit advocate. On my next side, I host I Know a Guy. And yeah, we're trying to marry the two, and it seems to be going pretty well.
I love that you said you found the through line, because I think so many times we look at these pieces of, interests and passions that we have maybe, or experiences, and it can seem like we have just a bunch of puzzle pieces from different puzzles at times, right? Like, what do I do with this? I don't really know. I tried this is in the rear view. Is there any redeeming value in this? I don't know, right? But I think it takes some examination a lot of times and figuring out of going, okay, what was the deeper thing underneath the experience I was having, right? Was this a conscious thing for you, or was this more like a revelation? Like, what did that look like for you as far as understanding the through line?
It was a revelation. Like I said, I've always, been in a position where I'm having conversations, especially once I got into the entrepreneur world, where that's all sales is connecting and chatting with people. And then realizing, kind of looking at a 30,000 foot view of what is it about it that I like to do. But then, I was having a lot of one-on-ones. I was doing a lot of networking. I was meeting people. And the thing is, I'm in the B2B space. The majority of people that I'm meeting every day are never going to be clients. They're never going to be, they don't aspire to be my criteria of a client. But I still wanted to be able to connect with them. I still wanted to be able to serve and help and find ways of networking and bringing value. And it was kind of an epiphany where it's like, well, if I just make this all about them and I record it and share it, that's valuable. People are going to like that. And it was one of those things where it's like, after I started doing it, I'm like, this is the fun part. This is what I've been enjoying. Because, before I realized that, I thought the whole part was the part that I liked, but I cut the ends off both sides. I'm like, oh, it's this bit. It's I'm going to know you a little bit better when we're done here. I'm going to look at the people I know and I'm going to make good introductions, or I'm going to help you in some way or another. And then, so revelation, long story short.
Yeah, no. That's awesome. And I think it's encouraging to anyone who may be listening right now, who finds themselves in that place of going, I'm trying to sort out the pieces, and I'm trying to find that through line, and I'm not really sure maybe what that looks like, to know that that's a part of everybody's story. If you hang in there enough, if you keep doing things and keep exploring and asking questions, right? I think the curiosity, understanding yourself, understanding what your gifting is, what you really want to do with your time and your life on this planet. It takes intentionality to drill down that hard, that low below the surface. And I think, especially as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to do that so that you're not simply just gliding across the surface and then finding yourself someplace years later where you never intended to be, right? That can be a very difficult thing. Through these conversations that you're having with people, is there anything that you're finding is has been like a major theme or something that's been surprising?
Yeah, a lot actually. And the way that it works is that kind of piles up. You'll have themes that ebb and flow, that come in, come out, and then you have overarching themes. One of the overarching themes that tends to be, at the core of what I do, the core of every conversation, the core of the people that I'm talking to is whatever words you want to put to it. Help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. The golden rule, treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Reap what you sow, the karma, whatever words you want to put to it, because we've all rediscovered the same thing a million times over the years, but we've all said it slightly different. That's been a reoccurring theme with most entrepreneurs that I meet, where it's, hey, I went out there, I led first. I wanted to help people. And it came back to me tenfold, and you're always surprised by it too, even though, again, we've known it for thousands of years that this is a thing that happens. So that's a recurring theme. And then there's other themes that pop up where it's, hey, be authentic. Everybody knows the phrase know, like, trust. If you're going to do business with somebody, you got to know, like, trust them. But then a lot of us try and put on this mask of this is me as a business guy. I'm this corporate professional, yada, yada. And then after a few years in entrepreneurship, everybody kind of changes. They go, that's not me. I'm talking to people I don't want to talk to. People don't know who I am. I'm not having the best results because I'm pretending to be somebody else and I'm doing it worse than them. So becoming more authentic, telling the stories that you want to tell, putting the foot forward that you want to put forward. So that's been a more reoccurring theme. And then one of the ones that I've more recently noticed is business has been changing over the past, 7 years since I've been here, for sure longer. But when I first started, like I said, 7 years ago, it was all about going out, doing it super fast, doing it super, big, and everybody's, renting Lamborghinis to post, videos in front of them and say, this, you could have this if you do X, Y, Z. And then COVID hit, and then everything kind of moved virtual, and we're all kind of learning how to do this part of it. So going from door to doors and things like I was doing to, having more of these meetings. And what I've noticed the last year, I've really kind of noticed it, is business has turned more to like an old school feel. We're doing it virtually, yes, but it's more of like the town square feel where you have your baker, you have your butcher, you have your lender, your bank, whatever. And we're all building these circles and we're all networking in a more traditional way, just virtually. So it's been something new that I've started to notice, and I'm really all for it, because you're building that circle of the people that you like, the people that you're able to put together to say, hey, we all handle our piece of the pie. We're all here to help customers, and more people are succeeding because of it, because they're not all, scarcity mindset. They have that abundance mindset where it's like, we can all work together. We can all help people, succeed and go further by not thinking of everybody as competition, but thinking of it as potential for collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that too, the word collaboration, because so many people, I think when it gets down to it, are really for that, but yet they may have been brought up in an environment that's very competitive. And so for some people, it takes them a little bit more time to shed that sense of competition over community, but there's far more value in the collaboration and the community aspect, and going, like you've been saying all along, how can I bring some value? How can I help people? And even if there's not a direct one-to-one thing going on, I know that if I'm seen as the person who can either be a connector or a person who can even give a little piece of the pie for somebody, a little piece of knowledge or some other connection, then I can be seen as valuable for that person. I can be remembered by that person as, oh yeah, like I remember having that conversation. I remember that person making that introduction, and there's more favor and there's more just, I think, willingness to reciprocate, right? I mean, it's like what you said before, the golden rule. Out of this, building this, right? So you're having conversations, you have your podcast, you've got a newsletter that you're about to begin doing, right? Talk a little bit about like what has shaped how the business part of this is looking for you.
So the business part's been shaped through the realization of about, being able to collaborate and work together. So, as a business profit advocate, I have some fairly obvious connections, and a lot of it is kind of, being a little bit creative where, hey, I didn't know that we could work together in this way, but I had this idea or they had this idea, and it kind of works where you find synergies you wouldn't otherwise, because I'm not going and thinking everybody's competition. Hey, I can help your client save this much money. Are you able to show them what to do with it? Kind of perfect pairings. And then that leads right into, the I know a guy thing, where it's like, hey, I don't do what you do, and I don't want to learn how to do what you do. I don't even want to remember how to say exactly what you do. I'd rather have a recording of what it is and then send it to somebody and say, hey, do you want an introduction? And then they either come back and go, no, I really don't. I saved them time. I didn't make an introduction that wasn't going to go anywhere. But more likely in my experience is, hey, they're awesome. Can you please introduce me? In which case they're going into that meeting, know, like, trust a little bit more. The 25%, it's not that first date vibe. They already know a bit about who they are. They can kind of relate right away. And then, like you said, I'm a little bit higher in their standings by doing that. So if they do come across somebody that might be a good introduction for me, people are super happy to reciprocate. So being able to do that and help each other out has been a big, big boon to the business. So it's changed prospecting completely, because I'm not out talking to the business owner. I'm talking out to the people they already know, like, and trust. And we're working together to find ways to help basically anybody and everybody we come across.
Yeah. And so that aspect of, of matchmaking, what have you seen that's been surprising on that aspect? Like, have people been very open to that? Has there been any resistance to it? I mean, talk a little bit about your experience so far in that, connecting people.
No, so far people have been very, very open. I've had one person say, no, not interested. And I think it was more of the get back to me when you're a little bit bigger, kind of not interested, right. Which, you're going to run into. But so far, I think people are hungry for it. We all spend a lot of time networking. If you spend any time as an entrepreneur, and you only really have so many hours a day to do it. How many conversations can you have before it's interfering on the rest of the work that you're supposed to be doing? So having introductions that that are going to have a little bit more weight behind them, as opposed to just a cold email, hey, you might want to meet so-and-so, where you can kind of vet it first, spend 15, 20 minutes watching and going, okay, this is somebody I for sure want to meet. Please introduce me. It frees up your calendar, and it's a little bit more efficient. And it has that more traditional feel where if you were referred to somebody across the town square from you, a new business opened up, and it was, hey, my friend just opened up a bakery, you might want to go check this out. You're going in there knowing a little bit about them, whether it's just their family name, who they are, you saw them growing up, or you just heard it from a buddy. That there's a little bit more to that network, that connection, than there is if it's just like, hey, I think you two should meet. It's check it out, go talk, and people have been very, very open with it.
If somebody is listening right now and they're thinking to themselves, okay, Anthony, I like this idea of networking in terms of how we're talking about it, right? Because I think there's like an old school networking that, I know when I first got introduced to this, word, it was the slick, like business card in hand, shake the hand, like, hey, buddy, work the room kind of grossness, right? And I was like, I don't want anything to do with that. But what we're talking really is more relational, which I love. And someone listening may be like, okay, I'm on board with that, but I feel like I'm really more introverted. What do I do? Like, how do I bust through that? Do you have any advice for someone who may be in that camp?
Yeah, they're not gonna like it. It's just do it anyway. I went to a networking event in it was last year now, and I seen a group of people, and I've always been a little bit more outgoing. I walk over to the group, never met a single person there, stand there, hey, I'm Anthony, what do you do? Because the best way to talk about yourself is to ask people about themselves, because they'll talk and then they'll ask you. So really good icebreaker, pro tip if you needed that. But then I seen a guy come over. He was an accountant, and just by looking at him, you could tell he was terrified. I mean, like rubbing his forehead, picking at his skin, touching his face, the whole 9 yards. And I was super impressed. He was obviously terrified, right? It might have been his very first networking event, super introverted person, but he was there. He didn't say a lot. We asked him questions, because that's the thing too. People recognize that because we've all been there. I've been that guy that goes, I don't know how to go talk to a group of people. It comes with repetition. It's like anything else. So people started asking him questions, made him feel a little bit more comfortable. You could see him calm down a little bit, but just the amount of bravery that took, I was super, super impressed. And more people are going to look at it that way than you think, because all of us in our head are like, what are they going to think of me? A lot of them are going to see themselves and say, yeah, that's that's a little bit rough, but I'm super proud that you're doing it. And it turned out to be a really nice guy. He was just super, super shy. So find people to make introductions for you. Start with people that you're already comfortable with, and be like, I'm really nervous about this. Can you help? Be willing to ask for help. Because that's how you're going to do it. There's no easy way, but again, nothing really easy is worth really doing. So the stuff that's hard, kind of means you probably should do it. But just kind of doing it, asking for help, and be willing to do it, even if it terrifies you, I guess. That's the advice.
Yeah. The other thing too, I've thought of in people that I know who are in that camp, is to encourage them to think about what it is that they have to bring to the table. Because in those scenarios, usually their eyes are on themselves to go like, I feel like I don't belong here, or I feel like I'm asking for something from somebody, and I don't want to just be a taker. Like I don't, and so I think remembering what it is that you have to offer as well, the connections, because everybody has connections. Everybody knows somebody. And so thinking through like, okay, what can I offer as a resource for somebody? Maybe I can lead with that. Maybe I can ask somebody like, who's the type of person that you're looking to connect with? What kind of industries? What's your client base? Like all these different questions can really help open doors and even spark in the moment. Maybe you forgot about somebody you even know. And then you're like, oh, you know what? You need to know this person. Let me, set up a quick email intro. And I think that's a less threatening thing than to feel like, and especially like when it's one-on-one, there's something that happens that's different than when you're in a group of people and it feels like just the group dating situation, right? Like it's like everybody's working the room, everybody's got something going on, and it can certainly feel more intimidating. So I think finding that one person even that you can connect with on a deeper level can definitely be worthwhile. And I love that you do this through your podcast. You have these calls with people, you have these conversations with people. Was this something that you immediately thought podcasting is the platform for this, or was that kind of an afterthought once you started having more of these conversations?
It was definitely an afterthought, because I was, like I said, it was kind of a realization that I'm having these meetings anyway. I don't really have a good valuable offer, kind of like what you said, a good lead in. Like I could make an introduction. I know folks. I've always been willing to say, have you met Mike or whatever it is. Yeah. But I wanted to be able to add more value than that. So, I was just kind of racking my brain about things that I can do because, again, they're never going to be clients, but they're still doing really awesome things. And a lot of them are doing things that I don't know what I don't know. So people blow your hair back when they tell you what they do. And you're like, that's kind of amazing. How can I help you? So it was kind of an afterthought where I was like, okay, I gotta find a way to just like tell more people about this person, expand their network, provide more value. And then, watching things like YouTube and stuff, trying to find the answers, or like listening to podcasts, trying to find the answers, or how can I do this? And then kind of taking a step back and going, oh, I could just do this. I could instead of watching all these videos about how to do it, I could just do it and put the videos out there about it. So if it's not there, make it kind of a epiphany. So yeah, it was everything that I've ever done has always been a slap in the face. I've never went in with a plan. It's always been something that ran me over. So
I totally understand that. Yeah. Was there any conversation with yourself as far as having to convince yourself of being able to do a podcast? Like thinking, I don't know how to do this, as far as a process, or I don't have the right equipment, or, perfectionism creeping in, like any of that stuff kind of come to the surface?
Yeah. I mean, just like everybody, kind of like what you alluded to earlier, we all have that imposter syndrome, but I've done, like I said, I've been ran over by enough things to where it's like, okay, I get the idea that I'm not going to get any better at it until I do it a bunch. So I'm just going to go out and do it a bunch real fast. And, figure it out as I go. I'm willing to look dumb, self-deprecating humor is right in my wheelhouse. So I'm willing to laugh at myself and say, okay, that was a mistake. Let's not do that again. So that's been a big help to do this. But yeah, you definitely start off and you're like, I don't know if I have enough stuff. I have a very cheap camera. I'm using a gaming headset. But it's not about me, at the core of what I'm doing. So I was able to step back and go, okay, this is more about what they're doing, less about what I'm, saying. I'm just trying to share who they are with more people. So that was able to help too, because, I'm not the center. I'm not the focus of it. It's, I know a guy. It's about the guys and gals that I know.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a certain amount of, the equipment can always be upgraded. The knowledge and skill set can always be leveled up, because the more you do something, the better you get at it anyway. So I think your example of just kind of diving in and going, you know what, I see the value in what needs to happen here, and I'm not going to let anything else kind of roadblock that and stop me, or wait for perfect, or wait for whatever it is that we sometimes wait for. And then we find ourselves, years later, still not having taken a step. So I applaud you on listening to that and recognizing that, and now having all these conversations recorded and able to be shared. As you're doing all these things, creativity is at work, right? And I would love for you just to talk a little bit about, like, how do you personally leverage creativity, either in your day-to-day, in these ideas for these bigger projects that you might have? Like, what does that look like for you?
So it's hard because, like I said, the majority of what I'm doing is talking about somebody else. So I can take some creative liberties with things like, cutting shorts and things like that. But it's the real creativity is finding ways to communicate with people to where at the end of it, they go, I've never told anybody that. Or getting people to open up in ways that they want it. And I've always kind of been good at that. People are always like, I don't know why, I've never really talked to anybody like this. So I think a lot of that is just be willing to actually listen. A book I always recommend people read is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Be interested, not interesting, is kind of at the heart of, what I'm doing. So listening when somebody's talking and not just waiting for your turn to talk is a big part of it, to where they might say something. Maybe you have a set amount of questions. Like, I have certain questions that I like to ask just because it helps people understand who somebody is. But being able to listen to what they're saying and go, you know what, you brought up a point, and then ask them to go into detail. Because a lot of us are only used to talking for a certain period of time, where I had my 3 minutes and now I'm done. But then you prod them to go a little further, and you get 10, 15 minutes into it, and they're like, never really been allowed to talk this far. So the creativity, I guess, is more of, I guess, listening, being able to ask interesting questions about what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. The way that I could see it also is that you help create these forums for people to feel comfortable enough to share things, to have conversations, to bring value in themselves, be authentic. And that's intentional. That doesn't just happen on its own. And it's through a series of decisions that you've made. And also you saying, okay, in order for me to create this, what do I need to do? How do I need to show up? Who do I need to be in the midst of this? Right. Because creativity is not just something that's like, okay, let's think out of the box. Let's, have these wild ideas. Creativity is also like the day-to-day practical, even process things, right? So you have a process when it comes to having these conversations. I'm sure you have certain questions that you like to lean into, or certain things of how you like to set the table, so to speak, for people. And then even the process of, what do you do when you have this recording? The practical, how do I chop this up? How do I make this into a podcast? How do I do all the technical things, behind the scenes, all that? And some of that stuff may not seem very sexy, but that's the stuff that if you didn't do, it wouldn't get done, right? And people would not be able to access these conversations. So I love exploring that and just seeing how, creativity shows up and is leveraged even in places where maybe it's not even the most identifiable from what we typically think creativity is, right? When you're having these conversations and you're getting stuff out of people that maybe, like you said, that they've been like, I've never said this before. Has there been maybe one or two things that can come to the top of your mind right now, conversations you've had with someone where maybe it was the person and the position they held or what the work they were doing, maybe it was just them themselves, that was like a standout, like, man, this was a really great conversation that I had?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few, and some of them have been recorded, a lot of them haven't, because like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. But some of them they really hit home, and if you've ever recorded a podcast, for anybody out there, recorded a podcast, you can't really take notes as you're going. But being able to, go back and rewatch and be like, okay, what did he say? Cause that hit something that I need to look at. And that's happened a few times. There's a few different areas where I've went back and I've been like, okay, what did he say? Cause it sounded good and I didn't write it down. So I got to go back and watch it myself. And a lot of it is just, like I said, it's kind of what we alluded to earlier, people saying the same thing in different ways. Whether, it's like I said, the golden rule, the Zig Ziglar, all of that, but people being able to say it in a way that I'm like, that's really interesting. I had one gentleman, his name was Andy. I interviewed him, and he was talking about, finding your unique ability and then partnering with others that have corresponding unique abilities. And how did they say it? It was, if you're a 7 out of 10 and you partner out with somebody that's also a 7 out of 10, that makes you a 20 out of 20 because your strengths and their strengths complement each other. And I'm like, that's kind of a really cool way of thinking about it. I may be really good at this, and this, but kind of not great at this. But finding people that are really great at that I have the rest of this covered, really ups everybody's game. And it's not an additive, increase. It's multiplicative. Hey, we were able to complement each other in such a way that we're able to do, a multitude better, as opposed to just saying 1 + 1 is 2. It's, 3 times 3 is 9, so hearing things that I already know slightly different is always one that kind of blows my hair back, where I'm like, I haven't really looked at it that way before, but that kind of changes a lot.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that stays with you, right? That you continue to think about long after the conversation's over, that takes root in you and becomes a part of your thinking, your methodology. And those conversations kind of sneak up on you, don't they? Right? Yeah. Like you're never expecting that. And sometimes it's not even from people that you would think that, if you have somebody who's quote more of a name or something, you might think like, oh, well, they're going to bring the most value or the most wisdom in the conversation. And it might actually be the opposite. And so it's, there's a level playing field when it comes to just being open to conversations and seeing where they go, seeing what unfolds, following curiosity. Like you said before, listening is such a key skill to hone, because that's really where we can lean in and go like, ooh, they said something there. I want to unpack that more, because I feel like there's a deeper level we can get to. There's more gold there, as we talk about like creating, and you're doing the podcast, and we touched briefly on this idea of this newsletter. Can you talk about like this newsletter? What's the difference between the newsletter and the podcast? Like, what's the idea behind it?
Yeah. So the podcast is where a lot of the content's being made. We're having the conversations with cool people doing cool things. I want to share it with as many people as possible. The newsletter is going to be kind of the vehicle to do that, where, it's going to be a weekly newsletter. Once a week, it's going to go out and say, here's the people that you should meet. So at your own time, at your own pace, if you're a little bit more shy, or maybe you don't have a lot of time to, watch this, you can look through every week and say, here's this 5 people or 7 people, because I've been doing like 5, probably going to go to 7 a week, and go, okay, I don't necessarily, not interested there, not interested. Ooh, that could be a good one. I'm going to watch that one on my lunch break. And I'm going to ask Anthony for an introduction. So it's just going to be a vehicle to say, here's who you might want to network with this week. Here's some people that are also interested in collaborating. And then on top of that, there's going to be like testimonials on the newsletter, where it's like, hey, Mike and Anthony, they work together. They helped the company, or they helped the business, or they helped somebody do X, Y, Z. Do you want to do the same, or has this given you an idea? Contact them here. So the people that are having repeat appearances on the newsletter, instead of just, hey, this was my week, I'm on the newsletter this week, but the ones that are going to be up there, constantly are going to be the ones that are actually collaborating and working together. And then we're going to share examples. So the idea behind the newsletter is we're incentivizing collaboration and then abundancy mindset. So you're not thinking of everybody else as competition. So if you are a newer entrepreneur, and you're thinking, how can I find power partners? How can I collaborate? How can I find different ways of marketing, as opposed to just cold door knocking, cold calling? You can look and say, okay, this guy does what I did. They partnered with somebody that's a really good idea. I'd never thought of that. And then recreating it yourself. We're not, that's the thing about creativity. You do it once and like, that's a good idea. Then a bunch of people can do it too. and they can have similar results. So the idea is saying, hey, we found ways that we can work together. We're showing it to everybody out there. The people that want to collaborate, they're going to be there more often. So it's going to help them. More people are going to be, incentivized to do the same. And hopefully it's going to be a compounding effect where we all have, like I said, that abundance mindset. It's like, hey, Mike and Rudy, Mike and Anthony, Rudy and Tom, they all work together. Here's different ways. Go do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also smart to give people different access points in terms of how they may consume something, right? Because not everyone's going to watch a YouTube video or listen to an audio podcast. And somebody may want something in written form where they can kind of skim or kind of get the information in a different way. And so I think having these different parts that kind of complement each other and also give, like I said, access points to you, to what's happening, to the conversations, it's a smart thing to do strategically. And that's something that, I try to encourage a lot of people that I come into contact with, even in terms of if they're artists or, they're leveraging creativity for their livelihood. It's so easy to get in one lane where you're thinking, well, this is my zone. This is what I'm good at. I'm only going to show up in this way. And I'm like, you need to learn how to write well, because that's another way for you to talk about what it is that you do and to bring information, bring experiences to people, and think about more of the end user, if you will, right? The person who's going to interact with the content that you're creating, not just yourself and going like, well, this is what's comfortable for me. This is how I like to access information. Therefore, this is what I'm going to stick with, right? Are there other places that you would think that you could dip into as far as, maybe it's different forums or different, expressions of this content like that come to mind? Like, is there a next thing that you're thinking about already?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, it was a video I watched a year ago, and it was one of those things that I start doing something and it kind of comes to the top of your mind. And you're like, that's what he meant. It was Gary V. He was talking about, he does long form content so that he can make other content out of it. So when I interview somebody, way more people are going to watch the shorts that I cut out of that long form video than are going to watch the full length video. So that's one form. But then I'm talking to people that are experts in their field that they're passionate about. That's the potential to write a blog. Hey, would you like to have a guest blog spot? Maybe you can write about your stuff. We'll have you as a contributor so more people can find you. It's going to help the SEO. People are going to find it. They're going to watch the full thing. They can watch multiple pieces from this one piece of content. So, a blog can come out of it. Posts, if they write, a blog, you can chop it up into posts, share it, certain ones on LinkedIn, share certain ones on YouTube, on Facebook, share certain ones on different social medias. So yeah, when you're talking to people that are really, really good at what they're doing and they're passionate about it, there's any number of different ways that you can share that medium. Because like you said, not everybody's going to sit and watch a half an hour, 15-minute, podcast. Not everybody wants to sit down and read a full length blog. Maybe they just want to post. Maybe they want a short. Maybe they're like, I just need a little inspiration today. Who's out there, who's going through similar struggles as me that can maybe give me a little bit of a pep. So that's what the shorts are for, where, you're asking people, how did you get through X, Y, Z? And then somebody out there is dealing with it too. We're not that unique as far as right. Entrepreneurs. We deal with a lot of the same stuff. So all of that is just more ways that more people can resonate with one another, and trying to, like you said, express it across different mediums where people are going to resonate. The newsletter is just going to be an area where it's like, here's all this stuff compiled, pick whichever version that, best suits your needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it because then it becomes a hub and people can figure out their best next step and figure out who they want to connect with, like you said, and what information they want to access. Because I think, especially today, where there's no shortage of information, it's really more of how can I find the information that's relevant for me where I am today so that I can actually put that into practice or walk away with something that changes the way that I think or introduces me to a relationship that I didn't have prior to that. I think that's the key thing. In the midst of all the things that are happening, even with AI and everything else, right? There's a lot of noise, but I think when you can be focused like that and offer things like you're offering to people, that's a gift. So thank you for that, Anthony. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Like I said, it's been what I've enjoyed to do. And if I could do this for the rest of my life, I would be tremendously happy. So,
yeah. Well, as we wrap things up, can you tell people like where can they find you? Where can they, access the podcast and all the links, all the places that they can connect with you?
Yeah. So I have my, I'm on YouTube at I know a guy _ same with basically every social media. The website, I just bought the domain. It's in development. It's going to be ikag.me. So I know a guy.me. The newsletter, you'll be able to subscribe to it on the website. They'll both be launching at the same time, hopefully by the end of this week. So yeah, not going to be hard to find. Going to try and make it as easy as possible. And, as far as, networking with everybody that I'm meeting, they're all going to be front and center. So it's going to be hard to miss them. And then other than that, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well under Anthony Markey. It's all I know a guide up. So it should be fairly easy to find.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And of course, I encourage the listeners right now, make sure that you make a point to connect with Anthony and access the content, the conversations he's having. I'm sure that it will be a huge benefit to you. And who knows, maybe your next great idea will come out of a conversation that was sparked right there. So thank you so much again for spending this time today with us, Anthony, and I wish you all the best.
I appreciate it, Mike. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.